All right, strap in everyone, because today we're diving deep into the world of software testing. And get this, we're getting our intel straight from a conversation between two pros in the field.
Oh, this is cool. So it's like we're eavesdropping on their conversation.
Exactly. We've got Can, a seasoned tester with years in experience, and Rule, who just graduated from CTSS Academy and is now navigating the real world of QA.
That's a combo that I am here for. I've always been curious about what those first few years are like when all that theory meets the reality of building software.
Well, you're going to love this then.
Yeah.
Right off the bat, Rule runs into a roadblock that I bet a lot of our listeners can relate to: how to write a really killer test scenario.
Yeah. That's something you don't always get a ton of practice with in school, right?
Exactly. And Can had this awesome analogy for what a test scenario should be. He said to think of it like a laser beam, super focused, with just one specific target.
Okay, I like that. No more fuzzy targets. So how did Can help to roll zero in and sharpen his laser focus?
Well, first, he emphasized breaking down those big, complex features.
Right, because trying to tackle a whole massive feature at once is, well, kind of overwhelming, right?
Totally. Can't call them modular test scenarios. Like building a house, you start with the foundation, then move on to the walls and so on. You wouldn't try to build the whole thing in one go.
I totally get that. Breaking it down makes it more manageable. You can test each part thoroughly. Did they talk about edge cases too? Because I feel like that's where things get really interesting.
Oh, they totally did. And Ken's had an example that I think we've all experienced at some point. He said, imagine testing a calculator app and you try to divide by zero. What happens?
Yeah, you get that error message, right? Like the app just freaks out.
Exactly. That's a classic edge case. Those situations that are outside of normal user behavior, but can still wreak havoc on your software.
Okay, so we've got our laser-focused test scenarios and we're on the lookout for edge cases. But how do you know if those tests are actually effective?
That's where tracking and analysis come in. Ken was really adamant about this. He told Rule, don't just run your tests. Keep a detailed record of those results. Analyze your pass rates and look for patterns. That's how you find weak spots in your testing.
It's like looking for clues at a crime scene, right? You need to gather the evidence, examine it carefully, and then draw your conclusions.
Exactly. And this is where automation tools can really help streamline things.
Ah, automation. I bet Turrell had a ton of questions about that.
Oh, he totally did. He was especially curious about where to even begin, because there are so many different tools out there.
So where did Cans suggest starting? What are the must-have tools in a tester's toolkit these days?
Well, for web applications, he recommended starting with Selenium. It's been around for a while and can be used to test across a huge range of browsers.
Selenium, that's a classic. I remember hearing about that back in college. Solid foundation.
But Can also mentioned a newer tool called Cypress that's been getting a lot of buzz, especially for modern web applications.
Why is that? What's the advantage of Cypress?
It's built for speed and reliability, especially for the way web apps are developed these days. It seems to fit right into those fast-paced, agile development workflows.
So Selenium is like the trusty old toolbox, and Cypress is the sleek new power drill everyone's raving about.
You got it.
Yeah.
But of course, we can't forget about mobile apps. Can brought up Appium, which is specifically designed to handle the wild west of mobile testing.
Mobile apps are such a huge market, and things are changing so fast. I bet that's a whole other set of challenges compared to web applications.
Oh, totally. Can pointed out that unlike websites, which are more or less standardized, mobile apps have to be tested on a ton of different devices. You've got screen sizes, operating systems, network conditions. It's crazy.
Plus, everyone expects mobile apps to be super fast and responsive. I get so annoyed when an app is laggy or drains my battery. I bet performance is a huge factor in mobile testing.
You nailed it. Users have zero patience for slow apps these days, and that's where Appium shines. It can handle both Android and iOS testing.
Ah, so you can make sure your app works smoothly on all the major platforms. That's super important if you want to reach the widest possible audience.
Absolutely. But with all this talk about automation, Rule wondered if manual testing was going extinct.
I'm curious to hear Can's take on that. Is there still a place for manual testing in this age of automation?
Oh, Can was very clear about this. Manual testing is absolutely crucial, especially in the early stages of development. He said, when you're first building a feature, it's like working with clay. You need to get your hands dirty, feel the contours, and make those initial adjustments manually.
I love that analogy. It's about that initial exploration, getting a feel for how the feature works and how users might interact with it.
Exactly. And manual testing is also essential for things that are hard to automate, like usability and accessibility. Those aspects are all about the human experience.
So it sounds like manual and automated testing work together, each playing a specific role in the overall quality assurance process.
Right? Can't explain that automation really comes into its own once a feature is more stable and you're running those same tests over and over again.
Ah, so it's like having a robot do the repetitive tasks so you can focus on the more strategic aspects of testing.
Precisely. But Cannon emphasized that technical skills are only part of the equation. You need those soft skills too, like analytical thinking and communication.
Those soft skills are so important these days, no matter what field you're in. But I can see how they'd be especially crucial in software testing where you're constantly collaborating with others.
Totally. Cannon said, it's not enough to find the bugs. You need to be able to explain those issues to the developers in a clear, concise, and helpful way.
You're not just a bug finder, you're a problem solver and a communicator. And I bet that understanding the software development process as a whole is key too, right? You need to see beyond just the testing phase.
Cannon was adamant about that.
Yeah.
He said, a good QA engineer isn't just a bug finder, they're a collaborator who helps the whole team build better software.
That's a great way to put it. It's about being a partner in the process, not just a quality cop.
Exactly. But let's get down to brass tacks here. What about actually landing a job in this field? I bet that's on a lot of our listeners' minds.
Oh, for sure. So, what did Can have to say about the job hunt? Any secret tips or tricks he shared with Tool?
Well, first off, he emphasized networking.
Networking, huh? Sometimes that word makes me cringe a little. It can feel so forced.
I know, right? But Can was a huge fan of LinkedIn. He really encouraged Tool to use it as a tool to connect with others in the field.
Not just having a profile, but actually engaging in conversations, joining groups, and building those relationships.
Exactly. And along with networking, Can stressed the importance of building a portfolio, even if you're just starting out.
I love the way he explained this. He said, imagine you're a chef applying for a job at a fancy restaurant. You wouldn't just tell them you can cook, you'd show them your signature dishes.
Perfect analogy. So your portfolio is like your culinary masterpiece, a showcase of your skills and experience.
Makes total sense. But how do you build a portfolio if you're just starting out and don't have a ton of real-world projects under your belt?
That's where open source projects come in.
Ah, open source. That's a fantastic way to get hands-on experience and contribute to something meaningful.
And Can pointed out that it's a win-win situation. You get valuable experience, and the open source community benefits from your contributions. Plus, you end up with something concrete to show potential employers.
Great point. And if you're feeling really ambitious, Can also suggested exploring freelance work.
Freelancing? I wouldn't have immediately thought of that for software testing.
Me neither. But Can saw it as a way to gain diverse experience and build a portfolio that showcases your adaptability.
Okay, so it's like being a testing consultant. You get exposed to different projects, different clients, and you get paid for it.
Wow, so much great advice packed into just this one conversation. I'm taking notes. But I think we need a moment to process all this before we dive into the next part of their conversation.
Agreed. We'll be back in just a moment to unpack even more testing insights from Can and Tool. We're back, and I'm still thinking about Can's advice on building that portfolio. It's like even if you're brand new to the field, you can showcase your skills.
Yeah, that was a really cool takeaway. But remember how much he stressed understanding the whole software development process?
He did. But why is that big picture view so important if you're focused on testing?
Well, if you're only focused on finding bugs, you miss how everything fits together. Ken said something like, if you understand the developer's challenges, their deadlines, the goals of the whole project, then you're a much stronger part of the team.
Makes sense. You're not just a bug catcher, you're part of the whole process.
Exactly. And I bet that helps you write better tests too, right?
Oh, for sure. You start thinking about how all the different pieces might interact, and that's where those really sneaky bugs tend to hide.
So it's more like detective work than just checking off a list.
Totally. Which brings us back to those soft skills. Can was really clear. Being a good communicator is a must in this field.
Well, yeah, you're always explaining tech stuff to people who might not be super technical.
Exactly. And Can said something like, finding the bug is just the first step. You got to be able to explain it clearly so the developers can actually fix it.
It's like you're translating between the code and the people using the software. And I bet analytical thinking is key too.
Oh, absolutely. A good tester is a problem solver, someone who can look at a complex system, find the weak spots, and then come up with creative solutions.
Okay, so we've got communication and analytical skills.
Yeah.
What else? Didn't they talk about Appium for mobile testing? I'm curious to learn more about that.
We did. Can sees Appium as essential for mobile testing, and that's a huge and growing field.
It is. We're all glued to our phones these days. What makes Appium stand out?
One big thing is it's cross-platform, so you can use it to test on both Android and iOS devices.
Wait, so you don't need separate tools for each?
Nope, Appium handles both. It's like having one remote control for all your mobile testing. But Can pointed out that mobile testing has its own set of challenges.
Like what?
Well, there are so many different devices out there with different screen sizes, operating systems, even network conditions. It's a lot to consider.
Oh, yeah. And we all know how annoying it is when an app is slow or drains your battery. Performance must be a big deal.
It is. Appium lets you test on emulators and simulators to see how the app performs on different devices and networks.
So you're not testing on every single physical phone, but you get a good idea of how the app will behave.
Right. It's a much more efficient way to test across a wide range of scenarios. But let's get back to Can's advice for landing a job. We talked about networking and building a portfolio. What else was there?
I'm all ears. I know a lot of our listeners are probably wondering how to break into this field.
Well, Can actually suggested freelance work as a way to get experience.
Really?
Freelancing, he saw it as a way to gain diverse experience and build a portfolio that shows you can adapt to different projects.
Interesting. So you're like a testing consultant, offering your expertise to different clients.
That's a great way to put it. But I think there's an even bigger takeaway here. It's not just about getting a job. It's about taking control of your career and constantly learning and growing.
Absolutely. That lifelong learner mindset is crucial.
And Can emphasize that a good QA engineer is not just a bug finder, they're a collaborator who helps build better software.
That's so important. It's about being a partner in the development process and contributing to the quality of the final product.
Exactly. And that's where all those soft skills come in: communication, collaboration, analytical thinking.
Right. And it's about understanding the entire software development process, not just the testing phase.
Can said something like, if you get that bigger picture, you become a much more valuable part of the team. And speaking of the team, I think we need to talk about some of the tools and technologies that are essential for any software tester's toolkit. We touched on Selenium and Cypress for web app testing, but what about the world of mobile?
Mobile testing is a whole other beast, right? And it's growing so fast, it seems like there's a new device or operating system coming out every other week.
Totally. But luckily, there are tools like Appium that can help you navigate that complexity. Remember how Ken emphasized the importance of being cross-platform?
Yeah, being able to test on both Android and iOS is huge.
Absolutely. And Appium excels at that. It allows you to write tests once and run them on multiple platforms, which saves a ton of time and effort. But mobile testing isn't just about juggling different devices and operating systems. Kant's also talked about the importance of testing under different network conditions.
Oh, right. Because unlike web apps, which are usually used on a stable Wi-Fi connection, mobile apps are often used on the go.
Exactly. And that means you have to consider things like what happens when the network connection drops, or what happens when the app is running on a slow 3G connection instead of a blazing fast 5G network.
So you're not just testing the app itself, you're testing how it interacts with the real world.
Exactly. And that's where emulators and simulators come in handy. Appium can connect to these virtual devices, which mimic the behavior of real phones and tablets. It's not a perfect replacement for testing on actual devices, but it's a much more efficient way to get a sense of how the app will perform under different conditions.
Okay, so Appium is definitely a tool that I'm going to add to my list to explore further. But even with the best tools in the world, you still need the right mindset to be a successful software tester. And I think Ken really nailed that when he talked about the importance of curiosity, persistence, and adaptability.
Those are like the superpowers of a great tester.
Absolutely. Curiosity helps you dig deeper and understand the why behind the what. Persistence helps you push through those tough challenges and find those elusive bugs. And adaptability helps you thrive in a world that's constantly changing.
And speaking of change, let's not forget about the importance of continuous learning. This field is moving so fast that you have to be constantly expanding your knowledge and skills to stay ahead of the curve.
Kane really emphasized that point, didn't he? He told Two-Rule that the moment you think you know everything is the moment you start falling behind.
So true. It's all about embracing that growth mindset and never being afraid to ask questions. And who knows, maybe one day, Two-Rule will be the seasoned expert, sharing his insights with the next generation of testers.
I have no doubt about it. He's clearly got the passion and the drive to succeed in this field. And with a mentor like Ken guiding him along the way, I'm sure he'll go far.
This has been such an insightful conversation. We've covered so much ground, from writing effective test scenarios to explore the nuances of mobile testing and even delving into the mindset of a successful QA engineer.
And it's all thanks to Can and Toorule for letting us eavesdrop on their conversation.
Exactly. But I think we need to take a short break to let all of this sink in. We'll be back in a moment for the final part of our deep dive into the world of software testing. It's interesting how we often think of testing as being all about the technical stuff, but Can really brought home the importance of those human skills.
Yeah, like you can be a coding whiz, but if you can't communicate or collaborate effectively, you're not going to get very far in this field.
Right. Can kept coming back to communication. He said something like, a good QA engineer is a translator. They can speak both the language of code and the language of humans.
That's such a great way to put it. It's like you need to be able to bridge that gap between the tech world and the everyday users who are interacting with the software.
And it's not just about explaining the bugs. It's about advocating for quality throughout the whole development process. Ken said something like, a good tester isn't afraid to speak up, challenge assumptions, and push for the best possible user experience.
So it's about being assertive, but also knowing how to deliver constructive criticism. Right?
Exactly. You have to be able to give tough feedback without, being a jerk about it.
That's a skill in itself.
Yeah.
Especially in a field where everyone's working under pressure.
Totally. But Ken's advice wasn't just about navigating those tricky interpersonal dynamics. He also gave Toorule some great tips for building a solid foundation in testing.
Like what were some of the key takeaways that our listeners can put into practice right away?
Well, he really emphasized the importance of starting with a clear understanding of what you're testing. He told Toorule to always ask himself, what's the purpose of this feature? What are the user's goals? And how can I design tests that will effectively validate that the software is meeting those goals?
So it's not just about randomly clicking around and hoping to find bugs. It's about having a strategy, a plan of attack.
Exactly. And that's where those clear, concise test scenarios come in. Each test should have a specific objective, almost like a mini experiment.
And don't forget about those pesky edge cases. Those are the situations that can really trip up your software if you're not careful.
Oh, Ken had a great analogy for edge cases. He said, imagine you're testing a car. You'd probably take it for a spin on a nice, smooth road first, right? But then you also need to see how it handles on bumpy roads, in heavy rain, and maybe even on a racetrack. Those are your edge cases.
I love that analogy. It makes it so much easier to understand. So you're not just testing the car under ideal conditions, you're testing it under stress.
Exactly. And that's the same approach you need to take with software testing. You need to put your software through the ringer, test it under a variety of conditions, and see how it holds up.
That makes perfect sense. So we've talked about test scenarios, edge cases, and the importance of understanding the software development process as a whole. But what about the tools of the trade? Are there any specific technologies that our listeners should be familiar with?
Oh, absolutely. We've already touched on Selenium and Cypress for web app testing and Appium for mobile testing, but those are just the tip of the iceberg. The world of software testing is full of amazing tools and technologies that can help you do your job more effectively and efficiently.
It sounds like it's a constantly evolving field.
Oh, totally. And that's why it's so important to stay curious and keep learning. Can really emphasize that point. He told Toorule, this field is all about continuous learning. The moment you think you know it all is the moment you start falling behind.
That's so true. Technology moves so fast that if you're not constantly updating your skills and knowledge, you'll quickly become obsolete.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But luckily, there's a ton of resources available to help you stay ahead of the curve. There are online courses, conferences, meetups, and tons of online communities where you can connect with other testers, share knowledge, and ask questions. Keb even recommended that Toorule start a blog or contribute to open source projects as a way to share his learnings and build his reputation in the community.
That's a great idea. And it shows that he's passionate about the field and eager to contribute. It's not just about getting a job, it's about becoming part of the larger testing community and helping to shape the future of software development.
Well said. And speaking of shaping the future, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive and leave our listener with a final thought to ponder. If you could distill all of Can's advice into one key takeaway, what would it be?
That's a tough one. But I think if I had to boil it down to one sentence, it would be this. Be curious, be proactive, and never stop learning.
I love it. It's a simple message, but incredibly powerful. It's about embracing the challenge of testing, constantly seeking out new knowledge, and being a lifelong learner.
And it's about remembering that testing is a crucial part of the software development process. It's not just about finding bugs, it's about ensuring quality, improving the user experience, and ultimately helping to create software that makes a positive impact on the world.
Couldn't said it better myself.
Yeah.
So to our listener out there, as you embark on your software testing journey, remember to be bold, be curious, and never be afraid to ask questions.
And most importantly, have fun with it. Testing can be an incredibly rewarding and intellectually stimulating field. So
Hmm.
go out there, break some code, find those pesky bugs, and make the digital world a better place, one test at a time.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into the world of software testing. We hope you've enjoyed listening in on this conversation between Can and Two Rule.
We've learned so much from their insights, and we hope you have too.
And until next time, happy testing.